My name is Dulce Valencia, and welcome to Telenovelascondulce, a podcast where every week I invite special guests to break down the telenovelas we love, from the music to the cast to the unforgettable plot twists.
Every slap, every imbecile, every secret twin.
I have got you covered. Welcome back, dear listener, to episode 2, part 2 of breaking down the story of la descarada más famosa of all time, Rubi. Kimberly Michelle Padilla Estrada joins us again this week. If you missed last week's episode, I have a lot of questions for you. Number 1, how dare you? Please go back and give it a listen, but just so you can see how much I appreciate you, here's a quick little recap. When we last left off, we were introduced to the character of Rubi, tan bella como peligrosa, a young and beautiful college student whose biggest wish in life is to be rich. She goes to college where she befriends Maribel, a young woman with a disability that leaves her walking with a limp, who has an internet boyfriend, Héctor, a young and rich architect who lives with his best friend, Alejandro, a medical student from a working-class family. Héctor and Alejandro live in New York, but return to Mexico, where Alejandro meets Rubi and immediately falls in love with her. Rubi thinks he's rich, but upon discovering that he isn't, she decides to steal her best friend's boyfriend turned fiancé, the rich and distressed Héctor. Her seduction works, and on Héctor and Maribel's wedding, Héctor leaves Maribel at the altar and runs away with Rubi to Cancun. And now that you're caught up, welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, Dulce.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm very excited for this conversation. I'm very ready for this conversation because I have a lot of shit to air out.
Oh my goodness. Well, Mercury retrograde is over.
Thank the Lord.
I know. Did it affect you?
I want to say at first I thought it didn't affect me because I'm like, okay, I'm not having any serious problems with anyone. But I did notice I was feeling a lot of feelings. I was in my feelings a lot, very emotional. And also I just noticed me kind of like backsliding a little bit in my health, not eating as good as I should. And also just like kind of slipping on like the things that like feed my soul, like journaling and hiking. So yeah.
Love that for you.
Love my backsliding?
No, I love that that's over.
Oh yeah. Today's a new day.
Today is a new day. Well, I'm excited to talk about Rubi because I think we can get to the part where the storyline really picks up because now everyone knows who Rubi is. So, last we left off, Rubi was in Cancun with Héctor. They had just gotten married, and Rubi, on their wedding night, cried into the ocean because she had married for love and not for money, and she was basically heartbroken.
Yeah.
And so we're going to pick up, I can't talk.
That's okay. I was also going to tell you, you inverted the two. You said she married for love and not for money.
Imagine, we don't have a telenovela then.
I know,
Rubi married for love.
That's it.
That's it. That's the story, the end.
So
and it's
sad.
A typical telenovela. You're right. Rubi married for money and not for love.
Yes.
We're just going to pick right off right there. Rubi in Cancun tries to fit into high society, and she meets Loreto, a fashion designer who becomes her best and only friend. I just think they like complement each other so well in their deviousness. And it's not the first time she meets him. She met him because he designed Maribel's wedding dress. But this is where she befriends him.
Right. Which, by the way, I think is so shady because I feel like, I don't know, I'm like, damn, like he should feel some type of way about like, this woman that he knew as like someone who was going to marry this man and then meeting the woman who stole from him, but obviously not. And I really feel like he really sees her just kind of, oh, this is my pretty doll and I'm going to dress her up. I'm going to make her pretty and she makes me laugh. She amuses me with her little deviousness. And yeah, I think that's how he sees her. But
that's very true because he is a fashion designer and Rubi is a beautiful woman who also gives him a lot of business. She's always getting clothes from him.
And he's designed, well, you know, obviously in the show. I don't know. I think he knows how to dress her really well because he knows her so well. He's like, yes. And he brings obviously the classic ruby red, but he also brings just like other really like interesting pieces that like highlight her power and her beauty.
Basically, Loreto is the only friend that Ruby is able to make because as she tries to integrate herself into high society in Cancun, it doesn't really go too well. Basically, the news got around that she stole her best friend's husband, that she had a very fast wedding. She's feeling the effects of her betrayal. And Hector does too because he had a really big project in New York that he was part of that he gets fired from because of this.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because literally like, and I think there's even a scene where like Cristina, when they finally see each other again, where she says this and she's like, you know, this is all you've ever wanted, for these people to accept you, but they see who you really are kind of thing. And that must be such a big blow for her.
And then back home, everyone's still grappling with everything. Maribel is heartbroken, but she still thinks that Hector might come back.
Ay, Maribel.
Ay, Maribel. Alejandro, like you said, he knows that this is who Ruby is, so he's just trying to get over her. Ruby's mother is just ashamed.
I just think there is so much that happens. But I think in terms of like what's going on at home, everyone's just really kind of shocked. This is really where like, at least what I see is like Maribel's story also starts picking up. Last week we talked about why we don't like her and how she's like this good girl and she's so boring. And I still like, whenever she comes on screen, I'm still like, ugh, Maribel. But she starts to have those moments, you know, she's obviously experiencing like this great heartache, but even in the moments where she wants Hector back and things like that, you see her start to fight, start to get just a little bit of a fire and start to, you know, decide like, okay, like if Hector is what she wants, like that's what she's gonna go for. And a really big part of this part of the storyline is just a relationship that starts to be built between Alejandro and Maribel. Because I really do love that relationship.
Really?
I do, because there's this scene, so I think it's the day after the wedding. Maribel is obviously depressed. She's in her room. She doesn't want to speak to anyone. And Alejandro comes and he has a moment where I don't remember too well what goes on with her dad and him.
So in his mind, Alejandro knew that Hector and Ruby were going to run away. So he blames Hector for Maribel being heartbroken, which is... Yeah. I just don't like Maribel's dad either.
I don't like him either. I don't like a lot of the men on this show.
Right, men in this show. I think Paco's the only one I like, and I know you have problems with Paco.
Yeah, I don't even like Paco. I think the only man in this show that I like is Marco, and even then, but just like the way that the actor who portrays Marco like handles certain situations. He's such a good bro to Alejandro too. So yeah, I think he's the only male character that I like. So in that moment, you know, Alejandro makes it known that he's gonna be there for Maribel, and he had nothing to do with that. And she's fighting him and everything, and then she looks at him and she says, they did this to you too. And she realizes like, yes, she was left on her wedding day, but Alejandro still had the same betrayal. It was his best friend running off with a woman that he loves, and that moment is the start of like this really, really strong bond between them.
Yeah, and a true friendship is born.
Right. And she tells him like, necesito tu amistad. She basically says like, don't leave me. And he's like, don't you leave me.
Oh my God.
Honestly?
Kim,
okay.
I think you just made me like them.
Because, so again, we watched this when we were younger. And so like in my mind, I'm like, Alejandro and Rubi, like that's the only thing that matters. But yeah, honestly, I ship them a little bit. I kind of
do too. Like, I'm like, oh my God.
Because it's, their relationship and it really starts to blossom in that moment. It's so beautiful. It's pure. It is the most pure relationship. And I think like looking back at like everything that Ruby does to Alejandro, she says, you know, she loves him, but really everything she does is so selfish. In my opinion, real love isn't selfish, and she could never let go of her selfishness. Ooh, is it too early to say? But I'm also kind of like, I don't think what Rubi had for Alejandro was love, because it was selfish.
Okay.
I know that's a big statement.
God.
I just want to let the audience at home know that we're like over here, like hand to our chest, hand to our foreheads.
I'm reconsidering everything I thought I knew / thought about Rubi and Alejandro.
Yeah, I know, we're like over here like gasping and like holding, like clutching our chest. I don't think I've ever said that out loud.
Yeah, I didn't know you felt that way.
You know, that first moment where I recapped this show for you, I was talking based off of like what an 8-year-old remembers, and when you grow up you learn just so much more about love. And yeah, looking at the whole situation now, and Dulce, you know me, and you know that one of my favorite tropes is friends to lovers. Yeah. This is friends to lovers. So obviously like the romantic side of their relationship doesn't start yet, but I think,
well, at least for Alejandro it doesn't start yet. I think for Maribel it does begin to happen, but I think she's still so overwhelmed with her broken heart and her love for Hector that she doesn't really see it yet.
Yeah.
But I feel like Pancha, for example, I think Pancha sees it.
Yeah, and Pancha sees all.
So I think she doesn't realize that she's falling for him, but I think it does begin.
Yeah.
But definitely not for Alejandro. Yeah. It's going to take a while for Alejandro to start to even consider Maribel like that.
And I really like how they approached Maribel's journey. There's this scene where like in Cancun, Hector's godparents go and they confront him and they confront Rubi, and he's telling them, but I love her. And his godmother, Elisa, tells him like, but look at all the hurt that you did. Like, how can you live a happy life knowing of all this pain that you caused? And that's when he decides like he needs to go back and he needs to talk to her. And in that moment where she first sees him and she's so filled with joy, her heart flutters. I see it in her eyes. The acting, by the way, Jacqueline, give her an Oscar.
Well, they're called TV Novela Awards.
Oh, what are they called?
TV Novela Awards.
TV Novela Awards?
Yes. So TV Novela Awards, I know a lot about them because I track who wins what award. I don't think Jacqueline Bracamontes has ever won an award. Rubi won the award though. Barbara Mori won a TV Novela Award for her portrayal of Rubi. They're the Oscars for telenovela actors. They are run by the TV Novela magazine, which I owned multiple copies when I was in Mexico. And they're hosted every year in Acapulco, which is in my home state of Guerrero.
Wow.
So one of my dreams is to go to the TV Novela Awards.
We need to go. Oh my God. Barbara Mori obviously deserved that award, but in this scene, Jacqueline, she did too. Because that moment where she's just so like, oh my God, he's returned to me. And then she realizes that he hasn't returned to her, that he's saying he's in love with her best friend. And on top of that, that he married her. And
oh yeah, because she doesn't know he married her.
She didn't know.
That's so shady though. Like, you leave someone you're gonna marry only to immediately get married with someone else.
Yeah.
He knew Maribel for 8 months.
Yeah.
He knew Rubi for weeks. Ooh, Hector.
Yeah, so then it kind of begins this journey of like her trying to win him back, which is my favorite Maribel, I would have to say. Her trying to win Hector back. And then, of course, like Alejandro's preoccupied with the whole drama happening at the hospital that he works at, with, you know, the doctor trying to
frame him
and basically bring down his reputation. So he's pretty preoccupied with that. So I really think this is where Maribel shines, because, you know, there's this, okay, so I love Rubi, like the character. I love her. I root for her despite everything. Seeing this show as an adult, now I'm just kind of like, she's more problematic than I remember. She even fools me as like the audience member sometimes. She fools me and I'm like, no, she can be good. And she has that. She can build on that, on these little moments of like kindness. And it really, she's giving us the bare minimum, but when she gives us the bare minimum, it's like everything.
I feel like you've completely changed over the course of a week. Because last week you were like, I need to take notes. Rubi is teaching me how to seduce a man. She's teaching me how to command a room. And now you're like, Maribel. And I'm just not ready for this transformation.
I'm sorry. A lot happens during those episodes.
What happened? Was Mercury doing something to you that made you want to be Rubi?
No, I think what it is I admire powerful women. Ruby, she's definitely corrupt, but she's powerful. And I think Ruby's very smart, very calculating. She's very intentional, and I really admire that. And I think that's like the trait that I really want to adopt, is I want to have more intention with every move, with every conversation, even if the intention is just to enjoy myself. She's very present, and like you see later on, every time she gets a bit of gossip, like she doesn't hold on to the gossip to like entertain herself. She looks for the gossip as like ammo, which is kind of scary, but still very intentional. And so I think the reason why we're seeing that I transitioned a little bit over into, again, I don't really like the character of Maribel, but I don't know, just kind of giving her credit where credit's due, is because you see her start to own her femininity, her power. I feel like I'm defending myself, but like I love Ruby, but I'm like, yo, this girl needs to get her ass beat. I literally thought that so many times. I'm like, why has no one beat her ass
This is where
yet?
we disagree, because we were talking about Ansa, and we were talking about what kind of parents we would be. And I think you're the only one that was pro chancla.
I guess, but I'm just like, sometimes you just need a smack in the face to smack you into reality.
Do you?
Some kind of smack in the face, and if it's not like life smacking you in the face with like hardship, then it has to be a literal smack. I don't know. Yeah, so the whole time I was like, someone needs to beat this girl's ass. And I say that with love. I'm like, I love her, so someone needs to like beat her up.
Oh
like,
my god, Kim.
Ruby gets her fair share of slaps in the show, but the first person to slap her, I might be wrong about this. Oh no, she's the second person. But the second person to slap her is Maribel. And that moment where like, can we just go? Okay, so I'm going to transport y'all, okay, to the scene. So
I've closed my eyes.
Close your eyes. So Ruby has this lavish home. For whatever reason, all of the scenes that are shot in their home are shot in their backyard pool. And so she comes home. The main housekeeper tells her someone's waiting for her. And she goes and she's like, ¿Tú? And then that's the end of that episode. And then the next episode we see, sí, yo. Who is it? It's Maribel. She's wearing her beach hairdo, which is a half-up hairdo. She's wearing like these really Y2K pink hoops. And she's like, hola amiga, ¿cómo estás? And she greets her with like this fake kindness of like, hi, my dear friend. And then when Ruby, she's thrown, but she's like, oh, this is Maribel. And she starts walking towards her and she starts to speak. And then Maribel just gives her a slap in the face and confronts her for everything that she did. And then she starts to dramatically throw all of the jewels that she ever gifted Ruby to her. And she's like, ¿Eso es lo que querías? Tenlas. Para mí no son nada. And I'm just like, I was like slapping. I was at the edge of my seat and I'm just like, finally, like this is someone need to tell. I'm like freaking out in my chair here, but I'm like, someone needed to tell her this. But that moment, I get so excited because I'm like, yes, the slap, her throwing these really expensive jewels at her. Wow. That was the start of Maribel really owning her power, which I do want to add credit to the first person to slap Ruby. I think goes to Sophie, and I just love Sophie, Alejandro's little sister.
Sophia, yeah.
They
call her Sophie, yeah.
Yeah. She's the first person to slap Ruby, and that's the moment that I knew that she was probably like one of my favorite. I probably
love her.
My favorite female character aside from Ruby, because she's a very powerful woman.
Okay, so let's give some little background because we kind of went all over the place. Basically, after Ruby marries Hector and they move to Cancun, so we're introduced to the Cancun lifestyle and the Cancun part of the story. As Kimberly has advocated, this is a part of the story that belongs to Maribel. Maribel comes to her own, and we meet all these other characters in Cancun that are going to become really important. One of them is Sofia, and she's just introduced as the reception lady at the hotel. I remember because I know this actor because she was in Al Diablo con los Guapos. And I was like, did she get her start here? Was she like this extra for this telenovela? Mm-hmm. And then it turns out that she's actually a really important character because she's Alejandro's sister. We also meet Sonia. Sonia, portrayed by the beautiful Marlene Favela, one of the most beautiful women in all existence. My mom still talks about her all the time as like her standard of beauty. And then we also meet a character portrayed by Sergio Goyri, which is Iago. Iago owns the hotel where Ruby and Hector stay at. Eventually, Hector's gonna buy shares of the hotel and become a socio with Iago. And Yago and Sonia have an open relationship where basically Yago gets to flirt with whoever he wants and be with whoever he wants, but she isn't. So it's really complicated, but those are like the three main characters that we meet in Cancun. So yeah, so that's a little recap of the first part. We should take a short little break. And then when we come back, we're gonna talk about other things.
The life of Cancun.
The life of Cancun. And we're back. So we're going to continue our conversation with Cancun because this is where the plot is really taking place. Back home though, Cristina has decided. So Cristina was caught in a love triangle between Cayetano, Maribel's driver, and Marco, a fellow doctor that works with Alejandro.
Dulce, what team were you on?
I feel like you're going to disagree with me.
We'll see.
I was Team Marco.
I was Team Marco too.
No way.
Yeah, because I actually don't like Cayetano.
Me neither. I liked him in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then as he went on.
Yeah, I don't like how he talks to her. He's very possessive of Cristina.
So he's, again, the men in this show suck. And maybe men everywhere suck. Just kidding.
A whole other podcast.
Men suck. We should start that. Anyway, the men in this show, in this universe, suck. And when Marco and Cristina first meet, Cristina basically dresses up and she basically hits on him. And he doesn't like her, so he turns her down multiple times. But then, all of a sudden, Marco starts to like her. But by this point, she has met Cayetano. And Cayetano is very gentlemanly-like. He brings her flowers. He writes her poetry. He's the romantic hero. So Cristina does something that I think is super empowering, especially for a woman in her era. She decides to date them both. And that's something that you never really see in telenovelas because it's always you are either in a committed relationship with someone or you're not. And Cristina is no, they have both asked me out and I'm gonna date them both. She doesn't tell Cayetano that she's seeing both of them. And when Cayetano finds out, he flips out. He's all angry. He's you're two-timing. And she's I'm not either of yours, girlfriend. Why can't I date? So I'm just yes, Cristina, because she's also a character that I feel she's always wallowing in self-pity. So I really like this Cristina. But anyway, she chooses Cayetano. He proposes. They get engaged. And shortly before the wedding, Cayetano, Doña Lola is the chismosa vecina that Rubi hates. And Refugio, Rubi's mom, decide to go to Cancun. Refugio is trying to basically make amends with her daughter, try to bring her into the goodness, into the light, and have her see the error of her ways. So they go, they stay with Rubi, and Cayetano and Rubi are completely at odds with each other. And poor Refugio is trying to basically convince her daughter to be good. It doesn't work out for anyone.
Yeah.
Because what happens, Kim?
Going back to Rubi's flaws, she's always been very jealous and she's always wanted things. I think especially with Cristina, and I think it does have to do something with them being sisters. But one of the moments that we talked about last week that really hurt me about Rubi is her ruining Cristina's dress that her mother made her and things like that. So Cayetano had been teasing her about how he was going to marry her sister and that their marriage was going to be a marriage of love, and that's something that Rubi was never going to have. And their tension builds up and they find themselves at a jewelry store. Rubi is there, a well-known customer, just shopping around. And Cayetano and Doña Lola, they go because they see her and they're oh, she can give us a ride back. When they're leaving, Rubi slips a very expensive piece of jewelry into their bags. And shortly after, they're detained and in questioning. In order to help out Doña Lola, who's freaking out, Cayetano makes the mistake of saying, I'll take full responsibility, which they take as a confession. And then we see that Cayetano's detained, and there's really moments where there's so many moments where Rubi could have really kind of owned up and helped. Mm-hmm. And she tries to for the sake of her mother, because her mother's freaking out, and so she hires a lawyer. But when the lawyer just starts building a case for Cayetano and he's okay, well, he's worked at this rich family's home for all these years. They never complained about anything being stolen. He starts to question Rubi, because Cayetano this whole time had been saying that she must have done it. There's no other way. It had to be her. And so when the lawyer starts pointing out Rubi too, she basically tells him, like, look, you're getting paid anyway, and in reality, we'd prefer for him to stay locked up. Rubi. And she does this knowing that he can get up to 5 years. She doesn't care because she cares more about saving her reputation.
Which her reputation is already trash at this point.
Right. But on top of that, she has yet another moment because they talked to the store owner and tried to convince him to drop the charges because his jewelry was returned. And she goes to the store owner and tells him also we'd prefer for him to stay locked up. So even through that path, she wouldn't have had any blame, but she still goes out of her way to make sure that he stays locked up.
So then Cayetano gets sentenced to 5 years in prison, and this happens the day before his wedding to Cristina. So Cristina is heartbroken, but she's determined to get married. Marco or is it Paco? I forget if it's Marco.
It's Marco, because it broke my heart.
Okay, so Marco all of a sudden turns into, okay, I see why he's your favorite. Marco decides to buy Cristina a plane ticket to Cancun, goes with her, because Cristina's plan is she still wants to get married with him. Why? Because she discovered that she's pregnant with his child. And so she goes to the prison, and this is why I hate Cayetano. Because in his pride, in his own mentality, he thinks the best option is to push Cristina away, which is a very Edward thing, what Edward does to Bella in Twilight. So basically, maybe it's just a thing men do. He decides that he's gonna push her away so that she can be happy with someone else. So, and he's like, I'm not gonna marry you, I'm in prison, like, just leave. And he yells at her very loudly, very violently. And then Cristina is like, I can't forget you because in my vientre, the proof of our love is growing. I love how they explain when they're pregnant. It's always so poetic. So basically, she tells Cayetano, I'm pregnant with your child. And Cayetano, instead of accepting her, still pushes her away. So when Cristina leaves, they don't get married. Cayetano's in prison. That's the end of that story for now. Moving on, Alejandro finds himself in Cancun for this expo. So he's in Cancun, which of course means that he has to run into Rubi. So they do, and around this time is where we're gonna see Rubi's darkest moments. She takes the advice of her friend Loreto because Iago, the rich hotel owner, is pursuing Rubi. Rubi pushes him away because she's not interested. But then Loreto is like, well, you should keep your options open because Hector's money is not gonna last you forever. And Iago is richer than Hector. So why don't you just see Iago and see where that goes? And so Rubi does. So then she sets up a meeting with Iago on his yacht. So then Alejandro is like, I'm gonna stop her. Like, I can't allow her to get on that boat. So he runs after her. He gets into an argument with Rubi. Rubi's heel gets caught. She falls, hits her head, hits the water. Alejandro jumps after her, takes her to the hospital where Rubi está entre la vida y la muerte almost. They don't know what's gonna happen. They don't know if she's gonna wake up, if she's gonna be in a coma. It's serious. And she wakes up and she pretends that she doesn't remember what she was doing. She doesn't remember anything to save basically face before Hector, who's like, why were you there? Why were you with Alejandro? Alejandro doesn't buy it. He's like, I know you remember. I know you haven't forgotten.
Well, she actually exposes herself. So he's talking to her and he's telling her, basically he feels so remorseful at this point because, and I think he even tells like Doña Refugio, like, we were arguing, like I was there. He feels
responsible.
He feels partially responsible, which is why he misses his flight because he was supposed to go back to Mexico with Maribel and her father. He misses his flight because he's like, I'm staying here because he feels so responsible. And in a moment, he's telling Rubi, like, oh, I couldn't let you do this. I couldn't let you do that. And she's like, I know, that's why I told you there that I loved you. And he's like, so you remembered? She was like, well, of course I wasn't going to say it in front of Hector. And he's just like, all again reminded of who Rubi is. Someone who's always going to look out for herself first.
And so she doesn't have an affair with Iago. Around this time, though, Alejandro, because he stays in Cancun longer, and him and Sonia, as a reminder, Sonia is Iago's mistress, beautiful woman, she and Alejandro start to have a connection. Obviously, Alejandro at this point is still very much in love with Rubi. He doesn't really have eyes for anyone else, but there's a connection between them, and it's very lovely. Like, I really like this relationship. But at the same time, he's still pursuing Rubi. Rubi can't deny that she still loves Alejandro. She still feels the attraction for him, and things start to get into Hector's head. So then Hector starts to become the abusive douchebag that we hate.
This is a content warning. We will be discussing a depiction of sexual assault. Please take care of yourself, and if you do not wish to listen to this part, you can skip over to the 30-minute and 50-second mark.
There's this point where Hector forces himself onto Rubi, and Rubi didn't want to. Hector's rationality is, you're my wife. You belong to me. We're gonna do this. After, they don't, at least I didn't see it. They don't show it, right?
No, they don't.
It doesn't get graphic?
No.
I appreciate that because
Yeah,
I was very
same.
worried watching that. It's not graphic, but it just cuts to basically Rubi lying in bed, not distraught, but just silent and stoic. And she's like, you've now proven to me what type of man you are. I've seen a scene play out like this multiple times in telenovelas where men sexually assault their wives and it's never treated as sexual assault because it's justifiable, because women owe this to men. And that's one of the things that I don't like about telenovelas.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it happens so much. Like Sebastián Rulli has done this twice in novelas.
Ugh. I wonder if he has to go to therapy for that.
But yeah, no, this is super shitty. I hated the scene. I hated Hector. And it just shows you, like, how he feels about Rubi, that she's his property. So that happens. That puts a big strain on Rubi and Hector's relationship. It's rocky. Refugio goes back to Mexico. When she leaves, she has this picture of Rubi when she was younger and tells her, you used to smile before. And it wasn't because of money. It wasn't because of material possessions. You used to be a happy person, and basically leaves a photograph to Rubi. And I think it does affect her because she does seem affected by it, but she's not going to show it. So when she returns to Mexico, sometime later, Rubi returns to Mexico as well. She gets into some sort of argument with her mom. And then the next scene, we see Refugio's nerves. So she's rubbing her temple. She's not doing well. When she gets to her apartment, she tries to take her medicine, but we just see the bottle drop. And Refugio dies. This is a very heartbreaking scene.
It definitely is. For me, it hurts me more with like Cristina because so as we know, Cristina's pregnant. She just lost, the man she was supposed to marry. Before they leave to Cancun, Cristina's talking a lot about how she has always felt like her mother has paid more attention to Rubi and has told her mother, like, I need you too. And so they had this conversation, where Refugio basically says, by some miracle, like, you are a great person and Rubi isn't. And Rubi's the one that needs the help right now, but that doesn't mean that she loves her any less. And as we know, like, Cristina has been such a big support to her mother and to Rubi and has always treated her mother with so much love and respect. And yeah, like she felt like she still needed her mother. And there was also the scene where Refugio comes back from Mexico, tells Cristina that Cayetano wasn't coming back, and Cristina is so scared to tell her mom that she's pregnant. And I love how they treated the whole thing, because I wasn't sure, because this is early 2000s. They're talking about unplanned pregnancy, like premarital sex. But Refugio's just like, well, of course I wish you would have waited, but this is a blessing. Like, every child's a blessing. And so that argument that Rubi and Refugio have is actually about Cristina, because Rubi just treats the whole situation with such disdain. Like, she's like, oh, well, she should have waited. Like, she says really ugly things about Cristina and about her baby. And Refugio just can't believe it. And, I don't watch a whole lot of novelas, so I don't know how modern this was, but I was just thinking, like, it's really easy for producers of shows like this to, kind of paint as like the woman who waits until marriage to have sex as the one who gets all of the blessings of life. And the women,
she's the good one, she's the moral one,
right.
She's the one that's gonna have like all the blessings.
Exactly. And the women who don't as being cursed. And so I was like, oh, are they trying to like put this curse on like Cristina? But I really don't think that's what it was. Because they show like this was just all the wrongdoings of her sister. And even like Sonia.
Sonia.
Yeah, she has premarital sex. She had sex with multiple men. And, you know, they treat her as this very respectable woman.
Mm-hmm. So Refugio dies. And Rubi is heartbroken. She's in denial at first. She's like, no, like she didn't die. No. And then when it dawns on her that her mom is dead, she starts crying and she starts yelling and she's like, I didn't get to apologize. I didn't get to apologize. And that just broke my heart. Because yes, Rubi is a horrible person. Something we've all said is, in her own way, she always loved her mother. I think now that you've put some doubt in my head about her relationship with Alejandro, I think her mom was the last person that she truly loved. Everything she did, she was sending her mom money through Doña Lola because she knew that her mom needed the money but would never accept it from her. She was sending her medication through Doña Lola. She was doing everything she could so that her mom wouldn't need anything. So in her own twisted way, Rubi always cared about her mother. And so it breaks her heart that her mom wasn't able to see that and that their last conversation was a fight. And so the funeral happens. Rubi shows up and she is kicked out of the funeral by everyone. La vecindad is all there. They yell at her. She's crying. She's heartbroken. She just wants to lay her mom to rest. Cristina's like, how dare you be here? You're nothing to me anymore. And kicks Rubi out.
Yeah, this is another moment. I think the one person who I really wish like would just beat Rubi's ass is Cristina. And this is a moment where I'm like, Cristina, like get her ass. Like throw your shoe at her. Like go, like fight. Yes, because so the reason why everyone was kicking out Rubi is because they're like, okay, like she had this argument with you, which is why she died, which like I don't think it's right to put all of that on Rubi because, you know, this woman was sick. She was sick beyond anyone's control, really. And like, of course, when someone has an illness that can have flare-ups that are caused by stress, of course you want everyone around them to be mindful of that. While I don't think that Rubi killed her mother, as like I think Cristina dramatically yelled, yeah, she called her asesina. I love that.
Oh
I
my
love that
God. What is this
Rubi.
change, Kim?
Well, it's because
we were team Rubi.
I am a tough love with Rubi, which is why I want her to get her ass beat. Because even though I don't think it was her fault that her mom died, she shows no remorse, you know, and I guess she does in some ways. You know, she's like, I never said goodbye to her, but she never admits to the fact that she did cause her mother a lot of pain. She never owns up to that. And Dulce, you do not like this change in me, but I do wish that she would own up to that, and I wish she would have done it in this moment.
Okay, I just don't think that it was right of Cristina to kick her out of the funeral. I disagree with this choice. And so she gets kicked out. She returns once everyone's gone and cries on her mom's grave and is like, I'm sorry. She says all these things, right? And then a hand reaches out for her. It's Alejandro. Alejandro has found her. He has come to pay his respects for Refugio as well. Rubi cries and tells him, they are telling me I killed her. And Alejandro, as a doctor, as a compassionate human being he is, says, Rubi, your mom was sick and there was nothing that you did that caused this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A man.
Oh, man. Do I think it was right?
I'm shocked.
I'm tough love.
You are
with
so
her.
tough. This is why you're gonna be the disciplinary person for your kids if you ever have kids.
Which is crazy because according to my family, I won't. Because I also really believe in talking things out. And so I'm just like, oh, like, you know, with my nieces and my nephews, like this is a whole tangent. But I'm like, oh, like, let's talk it out. But then when you talk it out and they still don't listen, that's when I'm like, okay. But Rubi, she's just always more worried about herself. And what I want from her is I want a moment of selflessness, even if that means like literally just owning up to your shit publicly. Because I feel like she does have her moments where privately she's like, oh shit, like should I have not done that? But she will never admit to any fault on her part because the most important thing to her is herself and her reputation and not getting in trouble. And my God, something about her seems just so immature to me. And Rubi, the way she behaves, it's very immature. That's something a child does.
She's also very young.
She is very young, but she's in her early 20s, Dulce. We're in our early 20s, okay? We know that when we mess up, and I'll even admit it, I'm a very defensive person. when I'm confronted, I might act defensively at first, and then I take my time and I reflect, and then I come back and I recognize what I did wrong. She never does that. She is a grown woman. Dulce, you're like, not my baby Rubi.
I am, because I see her as, obviously she's está enferma. Like, she is filled with greed. She is filled with ambition. She comes from a place that has traumatized her, and she doesn't want that. And she's just trying to do what she can to fix her situation. And she just so happens to be blessed with beauty. So in her head, the only logical way that she's going to make it out of is she's going to use her beauty to get what she wants and get the men she needs. But I think in the deepness of her heart, she means well, and she wants what's best for the people that she loves, which unfortunately there's not many people that she loves, but that's what she wants in her heart. And she just goes about it in really wrong ways. And as she grows, she just strays further and further from, what's good. So yeah, so I don't know. I like her.
Okay, just one quick note. Yes, she comes, like, the way she responds is she's responding to this trauma, but it also crosses over into envidia, and it just becomes about jealousy, and it just becomes about wanting to win. And that's like, that's the difference that you start seeing in Rubi starting at Cancun. She's starting to talk about things in terms of winning now. Because she's okay. Like, she's more than okay now. Not only is she not poor, she has a fabulous life. Why does she still want to take away from other people? Envidia.
I know.
This is how we parent Rubi.
Yeah, you can see two different sides of parents. Rubi, come here, Barbara Mori. I will protect you. So shortly after the funeral, Rubi and Hector decide that they're gonna spend some time in Europe. Basically, everyone starts to, move on in a way. We are gonna get a time jump. Before that, though, we're gonna take a short little break because we've been talking for 40 minutes.
Oh, dang.
All right, and we're back. So, Kim, you were saying that you really like how they did that time jump.
I do.
Lay it down for us. I'm going to close my eyes again.
Okay, so Cristina, obviously, she has this tension with her sister. She calls her an asesina, kicks her out of her mother's funeral. In thinking about her sister and, all the harm that she does for her, she starts to bleed. And Doña Lola tells her, well, you need to be careful. You could lose the baby. Of course, who comes to the rescue? Dr. Marco. Oh my god. That's a man. But so he stays with her and he helps her, and he even stays with her through the night, makes sure that she's good, she has her medication, she's eating right. Marco was there. He took her to go see Cayetano, was there every time Cayetano rejected her, and even had a conversation with Cayetano where Cayetano was basically like, please take care of her. Whatever happens, happens. Which to me was like, it's all you. Yeah, so Marco's there taking care of Cristina, and then he tells Cristina, Cásate conmigo, let me give your daughter a last name, which I'm just like, ugh. But he proposes to Cristina and tells her, I would love to be your child's father. And then we time jump to a park. It's Marco, it's Cristina, and it's this beautiful little girl. And they're playing, they're happy. Marco buys her a popsicle, and my heart was filled with joy. I'm like, yes, Cristina. Only to come to find that Fernanda is calling Marco Tío Marco. So they did not get married.
Cristina.
And they totally fooled us with that little time jump.
Mm-hmm. I love this. That's what I'm saying. Rubi was so well written and so very well acted and paced, everything. It's a little dated because, again, early 2000s. But every time I watch it, I'm like, dang, they really did that.
Yeah, they did.
Masters. So 3 years have passed. Rubi and Hector return from their trip around Europe. Their marriage is just as tense as ever, if not more so. Hector is suffering from back issues, which has made him slow down. Rubi doesn't care at all. She's annoyed at him multiple times. Hector's struggling financially too. Meanwhile, Alejandro has now become a rich doctor. and he works at the hospital with Paco and Maribel. So they work together at the hospital. Alejandro is now super rich, has this mansion, and is in a very serious relationship with Sonia. And so Rubi, when she returns, she's driving around town with Loreto when they stop by this beautiful mansion. And Rubi is like, I wish I lived there. And then she sees someone get out of their car. And it turns out Alejandro is the owner of that mansion. So then she's like, oh my God, he's finally rich. We can be together now. Which, ay, Rubi. But then it turns out that Alejandro is engaged with Sonia. And Rubi makes it a mission that she's going to stop that marriage, much like she stopped Maribel and Hector's marriage. Moving sideways, Cayetano still in prison, but he's looking to get out early due to good behavior. Cristina has written him tons of letters because she still loves him, and he has returned every single one of those letters.
Hasn't even opened them.
Doesn't know if he has a daughter or a son, knows nothing. Meanwhile, Cristina's daughter, Fernandita, looks and acts just like Rubi, which Doña Lola warns Cristina a lot. Be careful, she's gonna turn out just like Rubi. Cristina's like, don't you dare say that, that's my daughter. And Maribel is starting to develop feelings for Alejandro.
I think at this point she's like full on in love with him, yeah.
I think so. And so I like this parallel because it's very similar to the storyline that we had in the beginning, where it was Rubi and Maribel both in love with one person, in love in quotations.
Going after
one person. But this time it's Maribel and Sonia. And Maribel secretly in love with Alejandro, and Sonia finds out. And Maribel has to be like, no, I'm not gonna do anything about it. He's marrying you. He loves you. Like, you guys are gonna be together. Unlike Rubi, chooses to remain out of the equation.
Chooses to be selfless. I will add.
Wow, whatever, Kim. So then the day of the wedding comes. I feel like Maribel is experiencing PTSD from her wedding day because she knows that Rubi is after Alejandro. She knows that she's going to try to do something. Rubi sneaks her way into the wedding. She gets Alejandro outside and Alejandro goes to talk to her. So Sonia comes down. She looks beautiful. And then she finds Maribel and she's like, where's Alejandro? And then Maribel's like, he's out with Rubi. You need to go get him. But Sonia is like, no, if he chooses to come back, then great. That's the man I'm marrying. But if he doesn't, I'm not going to be the one to chase him.
Bravo.
Can I just appreciate Sonia?
Yeah. Sonia,
I love her.
I love her so much. She's obviously very beautiful, but she's everything like Rubi isn't. Yeah. She's a career woman. She's like, I'm never going to depend on anyone else. The reason why she stays with Yago, despite what other people think of her, is love.
She loves him.
She loves him. When she starts falling in love with Alejandro is when he's at his lowest. When he has no job, when his reputation is tarnished, when his prospects aren't looking good, and she loves him despite it. And yeah, I definitely love how she's not afraid of Rubi at all.
At all. And so she waits, and it's traumatic. I'm like, oh my God. Even though I rewatched it, I'm like, what's gonna happen? And then Alejandro walks back in. And he looks at Sonia, has the biggest smile on his face. He may not love her as deeply as he loves Rubi, as wrongly as he loves Rubi, but he loves Sonia, and he knows that if there's any person that can replace Rubi, it's Sonia. And so Maribel at this point, she's a little shocked, but she's also, I feel like her love also grows deeper in this scene because she sees what Hector should have done. Hector should have rejected Rubi. He should have looked at Maribel the way Alejandro is looking at Sonia right now. And he didn't.
Yeah.
And now we see what Hector should have done all along. So then Alejandro and Sonia get married. They're happy. Everyone's happy. Everyone's cheering for them. And they decide that they're not going to go on a honeymoon just yet because Alejandro still has some work that he needs to get done. And so they're going to wait a little bit. And Rubi at this point, she's angry more than anything.
Pissed.
Yeah.
I think she's pissed because, one, she takes a lot of pride in being able to steal other women's men. And I think that was such a strong theme when we were approaching the wedding, because I think Loreto even tells her, okay, you were able to stop one wedding, but can you do two? And she's kind of like, of course, nothing. And so she's pissed because she wasn't able to stop the wedding, even though she knows that he loves her. And she's pissed because she knows that just confirms even more how honorable Alejandro is. And she knows that not even like, they can't even be amantes because he is, once he marries Sonia, that is his woman, you know? Like he will stand by her. She definitely feels like he's lost to her.
So at this point, Rubi has been sneaking into Alejandro's home when he's not there. So Alejandro's mom has Alzheimer's. She, at this point, her health is at its worst. She doesn't recognize people. Her memory is stuck into the past when Alejandro was dating Rubi. So she thinks of Rubi as Alejandro's girlfriend. So that is how Rubi is able to sneak around. Rubi always had a really good relationship with Alejandro's mom. One of the few people to like her, and she also felt respect for her. Like she saved her a couple of times in Cancun. So Rubi really likes Alejandro's mom. And so like it does hurt her a little bit to see her in this state. But then because it's Rubi, and of course she can't just be nice for no reason, she manipulates the situation. So she sneaks around, and on one of these visits, Sonia catches them. There's this glass bridge that is in their yard, in their beautiful garden, and both Sonia and Rubi are on top of this bridge, and they're fighting. And then as Sonia walks, we see this crack on the bridge. And so they're arguing. Rubi's like, he's never gonna love you like he loves me. I'm the only one that he loves.
She tells Sonia, cuando se cuesta contigo, piensa en mí. And I'm like, the disrespect. And Sonia gives her a slap for that one.
Oh, Sonia. So then Sonia's like, you know, we're gonna go on honeymoon, and I'm gonna make sure that while we're in our honeymoon, he's gonna forget he ever knew you. And so as she walks away, the bridge completely shatters and Sonia falls. Rubi's like, Sonia! So she runs down, and we see Sonia with her eyes open. A glass has been stuck to her neck, and there's blood on her mouth. Sonia is dead. It's such a good scene, but it breaks my heart. And so the nurse comes running because Rubi's like, we need to do something. We need to call someone. We need to do something. And the nurse is like, there's nothing to be done. She's dead. You need to get out of here. And so Rubi leaves. She's like completely, está por todos lados. She's like, Sonia's dead. It was my fault. Like, da 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 da. She can't function. Alejandro comes home with this bouquet of flowers for his wife. And then he's yelling. He's like, Sonia, mi amor. Sonia, ¿dónde estás? And he sees Sonia's dead body. And he runs, grabs her in his arms, and just cries. Because he loved her.
He really did.
And now she's dead.
This news shatters everyone. The funeral comes, and they do an autopsy on Sonia's dead body. And they find out that Sonia was pregnant with Alejandro's child.
Just an even bigger heartache because obviously they wanted children. They had been talking about having children a lot before her death. To him, it's a really big loss.
And so he buries his wife and their unborn child. And that is where we'll end. I want to cry now. Thank you for listening to another episode of Telenovelas con Dulce. Come back next week where Kimberly will be back and we will discuss the aftermath of Sonia's untimely death, the appearance of Elena, Santa Rubi, and we will find out if Rubi can truly change and leave her ambition behind. See you soon!